So it's going to be okay.
I'm with you.
Okay, so here we're starting. Today's Daf Yomi Kesubos Daf Ches. I'm just going to point out what we learned in the Mishnah, and that's what our Gemara is going on. Rabbi Yeshua gave admission. He agrees in the following scenario: a man walks over to his friend, right? A man walks over to his friend. He said, Sadazu, this field that it's in my possession, that really belonged to your father. You look back at the records, it belonged to your father. So how did it end up in my hands? And I bought it from him. I purchased it from him. So the other man would have never known that this field was once his father's, right? And the guy and the other person said, not only did it belong to your father's, but I purchased it for him. So then you have no claim against the field. Why? Shehuneman, the guy who said the statement, is believed. Why? And this is the whole point of the whole perek. Shahapeh she'asar, the mouth that made a problem here, hu hashper shehiter. That's the mouth that said that it's not a problem. The mouth that said it was a problem was that he said it belonged to your father, but he can undo the problem by saying, I purchased it for him. So we believe everything he said. However, says the Mishnah, the Mishnah says, "When yesh edim shehi shel aviv." Let's say, without him saying that this field belonged to your father, there's witnesses that say that this field belonged to your father. So we didn't need the person himself to tell you that it belonged to your father. There are other outsiders, witnesses that said that this field was once your father's. And he says, I purchased it from you. And he does not produce a contract of purchase. So then, it's not believed. And actually, since there are witnesses that have belonged to the other guy, his father, he should take possession of the field. That's what the Mishnah says. Okay, so now we go into our Gemara. And our Gemara says, on Daf Ches Amud Aleph, first line. So the Gemara says, the listening. Let it. Why does the scenario, the case in the Mishnah, discuss when it happened to his father? Guy goes over and says, this field belonged to your father. You could actually make a case where you actually say something belonged to you. And for example, if you're coming up with these scenarios, a pesha asahu, a pesha iter, let's do a case. The listening. Let us Mishnah give an example of Maida Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua, who always says you don't believe people, but if a man says to his friend, Mana levisi mincha, you should know I borrowed $1,000 from you. Amana, right? Upratichalach, and I paid you back. So without the guy admitting that he borrowed the money, the other person would have never known he lent the money. So we believe him. Shehu neman, he's believed. And because he's saying that I borrowed the money and I paid it back, without him, you wouldn't know he borrowed the money. So therefore, he's believed. Pesha asar, the mouth that made the problem could be the same mouth that undoes the problem. So why did the Mishnah say a scenario about a field belonging to your father? You could make this scenario of he borrowed money from you and he says, I paid you back. And it's the same scenario of Pesha Asar, Hu HaPesha Hitter. Answers the Gemara, because the end of the Mishnah, this would not make sense according to the end of the Mishnah. Mushum, the Kaboila Misne Seifa, because the end of the Mishnah wants to say like this. If then you'll have to say that the last case of the Mishnah would be saying that if there are witnesses that said that he borrowed from him, so there are witnesses. He didn't need to say, I borrowed the money from you. There are outsiders that are saying that he borrowed the money. And he would have to say, Purativ, I paid you back. And the Mishnah would say, Ein Neman, he's not believed, because there are outsiders that said that you borrowed the money. But in this case, he would be believed. Why? Because he could have borrowed the money and paid him back privately. Witnesses saw this man lend the money, but when it came back to paying back, the guy that borrowed the money didn't have to pay back in front of witnesses, so everything he says could be true. We have a rule: if you lend your friend money in front of witnesses, so that doesn't mean that he has to now find witnesses when he wants to pay you back. He doesn't have to pay you back With Adam, he doesn't have to pay you back. He could pay you back privately. So if the Mishnah would have said the case of Im Yesh Adam Shulav Amenu Hu Oimer Prativ, if the Mishnah would have said that case, the case would have said that he is believed. And the Mishnah wants to end off with a scenario where he is not believed. The only scenario that the Mishnah picked up where he would not be believed is when he goes over and says the field belonged to your father. And if there are witnesses that said this field belonged to your father and he's saying I purchased it and he doesn't have the proof of purchase, then he's not believed. So the Mishnah wants to have a case of Ein Anemim. That's why the Mishnah did not use the case of Mani Levisi Micha Uprativ Lecha. We didn't use this case. Now the Mishnah, the Gemara is still at it. Now, the point over here is a fascinating point in the Chumash. The Chumash has a situation called Maida B'Miktsas, means that if I go over to you and I say to you, you owe me money. So if you deny completely, in other words, you never lent me money. You tell me, I say I lent you $1,000 and you say never happened. So then you don't have to swear. We trust you. But if you would say, the Chumash says that if you agree to part of it, if you agree that, yes, I borrowed the money, but I paid you $500 back and I still owe you $500. So if you agree to the loan, then you have to swear that you borrowed the money, that you swear that you paid back and that you still owe me money. That's called a shvua moida b'miktsas. So if you denied it completely, you don't have to swear. But once you start admitting it, then we require you to swear that you paid back half and that you still owe the other half. That is a moida b'miktsas, and we'll discuss what's the reason for that. Why should that be true? But the listening, I would think that if you deny everything, the guy should swear completely. But we're saying no. When he denies everything, you don't have to swear. It's only when he admits to part of the loan, that's when he has to swear. But anyway, be that as it may, the Gemara asks a question, let the Mishnah say, Moida Rabbi Yeshua would agree, if a man tells his friend, and this should be the case of the Mishnah, Mana la'avicha biyadi, your father lent me money. He lent me a mana. Let's call that $1,000. V'hachaltiv pras, and I paid him back half of it. Now, if it wasn't for your father, if it was a regular case of moida b'miktsas, you would have to swear. In this case, Shihu Neman, he's believed. Why is he believed? Because what does this guy know what his father lent, who his father lent money to? If this person didn't walk over to him and says, oh, I borrowed $1,000 from your father, he would have never known that. So since it's something that he would have never have known, so this, out of the goodness of his will, he goes over to his friend, I borrowed $1,000, but I paid him back half. So we don't require him a shvua. We don't require him to swear that he paid back half. Under normal circumstances, yes, but here he looks like the good guy because he's coming over to a man who would never know what his father did, and he's telling him, I borrowed money from your father and I owe him half. So that should be a nice chiddush of the Mishnah. If the Mishnah wants to tell you that you're believed and we trust you, here's a case that we would trust you, and there's another novelty that you wouldn't even have to make a shvua, because most time your moida b'miktsas, you have to make a shvua. Here, you would not have to make a moida b'miktsas shvua. So the Gemara says, wait a second, Ali b'daman, who are you going according to? It means you're telling me you wouldn't have to make a shvua in this case? Ali b'darabanan. If you're aligning your opinion, if Rabbi Yeshua, who's the author of our Mishnah, went according to Rabbanan, saying we don't need the guy to walk over to him and say, oh, your father lent me money. Rabbanan will hold that even if the Yerush, right, the son of the father, you see, the son of the deceased father would walk over and he would tell him, I read my father's books and I know you borrowed money from my father. The Rabbanan will still say that he doesn't have to make a shvua. Ha'amri meishiv aveidahavet. The rabbi says that it's always like you're doing him a favor by returning him a lost object. In other words, you would never require a shvua. It's not only if he walks over and says, I borrowed money from your father. Even if the Yerush, the son, goes over to the guy and says, you must have borrowed money from my father, it still wouldn't require a shvua. So wouldn't make our Mishnah cannot go according to, if Rabbi Yeshua held like that opinion, then the Rabbi Yeshua would be required to say something even more novel, where the man, the Yerush, came over to the guy and said, "You owed my father money." And we'll see what this means. Meishiv Aveda. When you do something out of your own goodwill, Chazal did not require you to make a shavua. For example, if you found a lost object, right? You found $1,000. So you say, "Who lost this money?" And the guy says, "I did." And then you return the money to the guy. He says, "No, there was $2,000 there." So we don't require somebody who finds a lost object and is returning a lost object to make a shvua, because he's being Mr. Nice Guy returning something, right? And if you're requiring him to make shvua, a swearing every time someone accuses him of keeping the thing he found, nobody's going to return lost items anymore. So same thing over here. If the Rabbanan saying, no matter who initiates the conversation, even if the son initiated the conversation, we will not require the guy to swear, because he's nice enough to agree that the transaction did occur between him and his father. So we would, according to Rabbanan, we never require you to swear. So it's no novelty according to Rabbanan. Ilad Reb Lezer B'Yankov, if you go according to Reb Lezer B'Yankov, he holds that you would be required to shvua. And that's why our Mishnah, because he says that if somebody comes, if he would go over and says, "I owe your father money, and I paid him back half of it," Rabbi Lezer Yaakov says you would be required to swear, and that's why our Mishnah doesn't say that, doesn't use this case. Now, what machlekes are we talking about? The Tanya we learned in a brisa. Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov says, "Pa'amim, sometimes she'odam nishba al tanas atzmai." Sometimes a person, even out of his own admission, he can cause himself to swear. He walks in. Usually, you're required to swear is if there's somebody's litigating you. Somebody's coming over to you and accusing you of something, and you agree that it's partly true, but you pay back, then you're required to swear. Reb Lezer ben Yaakov says that you could sometimes be required to swear if you initiated the conversation. Ketzad, manali avicha biyadi, guy goes over to a person, says, "Oh, your father lent me money, v'achalti pras, and I paid him back half." Hareza nishba. According to Reb Lezer ben Yaakov, you would have to swear. And that's a case where you came up out of your own volition and admitted to the whole thing, and you will be required to swear that what you're saying is true. But Chachamim says, you're never required to swear, especially when you're dealing with somebody's father. He never knows what was going on in his father's accounts and his business transactions. So even if the man himself said, "Yo, I looked over my father's accounts, I see he lent you money," we wouldn't require him to the person he's saying that to, even if he was a moed b'mitzvahs, we wouldn't require him to swear because he's like doing him a favor by agreeing to the whole thing. He could say, "I had nothing to do with your father. Your father just wrote my name down. I don't even know." So therefore, Chachamim say you're pater in all scenarios. So our Mishnah, that's why our Mishnah didn't use this case over here, because it wouldn't come out, align itself, not like Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov, not like the Chachamim. According to Chachamim, you never required a shvua. According to Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov, you are always required a shvua. So it wouldn't make sense. So that's why the Mishnah uses a nice, smooth example of the field, where a guy goes over to somebody and says, "This field belonged to your dad. I purchased it from him, and that's it. We trust him." And Pesha Asa, he made the whole problem with his mouth. He can undo the whole problem with his mouth. Continues the Gemara. Now the Gemara just wants to examine Reb Lezer ben Yaakov's opinion. We made a case. And this takes us to the next Mishnah. Very easy. We said a case that Reb Lezer ben Yaakov says that if a man walks over to somebody and says, "Your dad lent me money. However, he lent me $1,000. I paid him half of it." So Reb Lezer says, "It's moed b'mitzvahs. You have to swear in Bezdin that you're telling the truth." Why not? Why should Reb Lezer ben Yaakov not say that this is like returning a lost object? Because if he didn't walk over to the guy, he would have never known that his father lent him money. So Reb Lezer ben Yaakov, Lesle Meishiv Aveda Pater, would not Reb Lezer ben Yaakov hold the concept that if you return a lost object They don't require you to swear. Just like when you find the lost object, nobody can force you to swear, hey, you must have found more and just returning part of it. No, if you're doing the favor of offering announcing that you found something, we trust you. So also over here, if a man walks over to somebody and says, your father lent me money, we should trust him without requiring him to make a shavua, that what he's saying is true. Rav's corrected it. Rab Lezer ben Yaakov is talking about b'toyanai kotan, when the deceased son, okay, he's a young under bar mitzvah boy, and he's the one that's claiming that my father lent you money. So the Gemara says, that cannot be. If a kotan has a claim, or an imbecile has a claim against you, you don't have to swear, because the pasuk says ki yitain ish kasef el re'eu. The Torah says ki yitain ish. I want to point it out where this whole discussion is. The Torah says ki yitain ish el re'eu kasef or kelim lishmar. So it says a man, the problem is between two people over bar mitzvah. Then you have the problem of kihuzeh, which means that a moed b'miktsas has to swear, but not a kotan. Answers the Gemara, my kotan. What did Rabbi Eliezer mean that you're swearing? It's not that you're walking over to the guy and says, your father lent me money. It's gadol. It's actually the father's over bar mitzvah son. The father died. His son, who's over bar mitzvah, is now accusing you of the money. It's not like you on your own came to and offered this information. He's accusing you that my father lent you money. V'mai karelei kotan. Why do we call him a kotan? The gabe milas to aviv kotanhu, because he's when it's like a phrase. He's really over bar mitzvah, but in understanding his business transactions of his father, we call him a kotan, somebody who's under bar mitzvah. So therefore, that's what the case is talking about. It's not really he's offering the information. He's actually being accused by the deceased man's son that my father lent you money. So the Gemara says that's a regular case. Is that he offering up the information? That's somebody accusing him of. And Rabbi Lezer says that it's tanas atzma. You're swearing on your own volition. So the Gemara says tanas acherim. Somebody's accusing him. And Vahidas Atzman, he's agreeing to the accusation that he did make a transaction with his father. So the Gemara says, every case is like that. When somebody comes to you and says, you owe me money, and you're agreeing to part of it. You said, yes, I owe you money, but not whatever you're saying. I only owe you part of what you're saying. So what is the case of Rab Lezer ben Yaakov talking about when you have to swear if you're saying something to that, I owed your father money and I paid him half. So Gemara goes back to the first scenario. A man died, and his young boy, his under bar mitzvah boy, comes over and says, my father lent you money. Now, why would Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov hold that? Now we have to just explain one thing. Why is it that when a person denies, if I come to you and say, you owe me money, and you deny the whole thing, you don't have to swear. Why? Why is it that way? The answer is because if what I'm saying is true, you wouldn't have the courage enough to deny it. Actually, I lent you money. How could you have the guts enough? You have to be a really cold person to deny the whole thing. So if you have the guts enough to deny it, you must be saying the truth. So a guy who is agreeing to part of it is really, he didn't have the guts to deny the whole thing, because he knows that I did borrow the money. So really, he really wants to pay the whole money back, and he wants to agree that this loan occurred. But the reason why he doesn't want to say it, because he wants to buy time. So he says, "Oh, I paid you back half. I only owe you half." Really, he has good intentions. He really owes the whole money. He never paid anything back, but he just wants to buy time so he can actually make the money to pay the other half back. So he just at first denies it. So on this, the Torah says you're going to deny it, but you might come to never pay it. So therefore, the Torah require you that when you're moed b'miktsas, you should swear. So this is all based on the premise that you could have, you don't have the guts to deny the whole thing. So the machlokes, now the Gemara is going to understand that when you're facing the person that loaned you the money, everybody agrees you have no guts to deny the whole thing if it never occurred. If it occurred, you have no guts to deny the whole thing. The question is, would you have the guts to deny it when you're facing the son of the one that lent you the money? Now let's read it inside. They're arguing in Rabba's explanation of the Torah's halacha, the Torah's din, that when you deny everything, when the litigant denies the loan ever occurred, he doesn't have to swear. And when he agrees to part of it, he does have to swear. The Amar Rabba said, why would the Torah say, Moide b'miktsas? Moide miktsas, if you agree to part of the loan, that means he says, you owe me $1,000. And you say, no, it was only $500. If you agree to that, you have to swear that you paid back and that you owe another $500. Because chazaka, because we have a presumed fact that if the whole thing never occurred, nobody has the guts enough to deny the whole thing in front of the one that lent them the money. So therefore, if someone comes over to you and says, you owe me the money, you would love to, you would love to have the guts enough to deny everything. But why didn't you deny everything? Because the general person doesn't have the courage enough to deny everything. So therefore, you have to agree to something because you don't have the guts enough to deny everything. So if you did deny everything, you must be saying the truth. That's the point. If you did deny everything, you must be saying the truth. But now, if you agree to half, I'm accusing you that you're not saying the truth even with the half. So we go to Amid Beis. Therefore, you should have agreed to everything. Why didn't you agree to the entire loan? Because you want to buy some time. And therefore, I'm going to buy time by saying I paid it. And I'm really a good person. And I'm going to buy time. And when I have money, I'll say, I made a mistake. I really didn't pay it. So therefore, the whole thing is a lie. Therefore, Rahman Amar, let's put a shvua on him, make him swear, so he will agree to everything, because we are afraid that if he gets away with it, he's not going to even pay that half. Now, therefore, Rab Lezer ben Yaakov says, when a small boy comes to you and says, my father loaned you money, would you have the courage enough to deny everything? So Rab Lezer ben Yaakov says, a person would not deny not only to the guy himself, but to the son of the person he loaned. He would not have the courage to deny everything. Therefore, if he's a moida b'miktsas, therefore he would have to swear. He's not doing the guy a favor because he wouldn't have the courage enough to deny everything. So by him agreeing to moida b'miktsas, that's the only claim that he can say. And therefore, he's not doing anybody a favor. So just like a regular moida b'mitzvah, you have to swear. So also if the son, even the small under bar mitzvah boy of the deceased says that you owed my father money and you moida b'mitzvah, you would also have to swear to that son. Rabbanan says, no. Who the enem is? To deny everything to the guy that lent you the money, you have no courage to do that. Normally for the son, you would have the courage to do that. But the fact that you didn't do that, and although you could have denied the whole thing. So if you're moida b'mitzas, you're doing him a favor. Okay, you're agreeing to something. It's like you're returning a lost object, so you don't have to swear. And that is the machlokes between the Rabbanan and that's why it's called Tainus Atzmai, because it's really, according to Reb Lezer ben Yaakov, even if it's the young kid under bar mitzvah who's we don't give credence to somebody who's under bar mitzvah, so we would require you to swear if you're a moida b'mitzvah, according to Reb Lezer ben Yaakov. According to Rabbanan, even if the son was over bar mitzvah and he's just saying that you owed my father money, the litigant would have had the courage to deny the whole thing. And since he didn't, and he's just a moida b'mitzvah, we assume he's saying the truth, and we don't require him to swear. And that is the whole machlokes between Reb Lezer ben Yaakov and the Rabbanan. Okay, new Mishnah. Mishnah says, "Ha'edim she'amru." Now, really, if you have a contract that has Adam that said that so-and-so loaned money, the fact is that should be enough of a contract. But we have a requirement midrabanan that all contracts have to have ratified by Bezdin to prove that the witnesses that signed on the bottom are not forged signatures. Okay, they're not forged signatures because there was a lot of problem with people forging documents and and forging signatures on the bottom. So now there's a star that comes out that Reuven owes money, that Reuven lent money to Shimon. Okay, so but the document is unratified. It's not proven. It's not. We don't know if it's 100% true. So the witnesses come and look at the document, and Eidim she'amru kasav yadenu who's that? It is our handwriting. We signed on this document, so this loan occurred. And right away they said, but the problem is, avanusim hayinu. We were scared for our lives when we signed on this document. Or ketanim hayinu. Or when we signed on this document, we were under bar mitzvah. Psula edis hayinu. Or we were relatives, so we were pasula edis. So at the same token that they ratified and said that this was our handwriting, so these witnesses, this was true, they at the same token, right away they said, but you should know that at the time we signed it, we were under duress, or we were not kosher witnesses. So then, we trust the Eidim and say, hey, you're right, we can't say that this is a good star. But let's say you have a star, and b'myesh Eidim shkusav yodam, we have other Eidim. We didn't need the Eidim that signed on the star to say that this was my handwriting. We had other Eidim that says, oh, this is so-and-so's handwriting. Or we have another ratified contract with similar signatures that was ratified. And the people that signed on that ratified contract look like that the same people are signing on this contract. So this contract must be also kosher. So then, even if those Eidim come and say, oh, when we signed in this contract, we were puzzled or we were forced, we don't believe. Again, if we need you to ratify the contract, so we say pesha asahu pesha ita, you can actually decide which direction it's going. But if we didn't need you to say that this was ratified because we ratified this contract already without you, so even if the Eidim say, come back and says, oh, but we signed on the contract, but we were under duress, we don't believe them anymore. And it's a kosher contract. Amar Rami Bachama. Rami Bachama said, Lai Shanu, this was not taught. Elisha Amru Anusim Ayunu Machmas Maman. When did we say that we don't trust them, right? If there's Eidim that come from another place, and then they say, oh, we were puzzled, then we don't trust them. Rami Bachama said, Lai Shanu, this was not taught. Elisha Amru Anusim Ayunu Machmas Maman. We were forced into, because we were going to take a financial loss if we didn't sign on the shtar. The guy was threatening to, take away our money. So we signed on it. Then we don't trust them. And the reason why we don't trust them is because they're signing falsely on something. And by saying we were forced because of money, they're basically saying, oh, we did something wrong by signing on the shtar. We sacrificed the truth for the sake of not losing money. So they're basically saying that they are bad people. And a person is never believed to say that he did something wrong. You can't say testimony against yourself. Ein odam mesim atzmei rasha. But if they said anusim hayinu machmas nefashis, we were scared of our lives, and that's why we signed on it. Harei elu namonim, they would be believed in the second part of the Mishnah. The second part of the Mishnah, that if they would say we were forced, there was a gun to our head, and that's why we signed it, then they would believe. Even if there was Eidim, we didn't need them to ratify it. But if they say that, we would trust them. Amalei Rava said, Kol Kamine. Is that true? Can we say that we would believe them? When they signed on this, once you have a ratified contract, that is the concept of these Eidim that are signed on the bottom. They're already saying their testimony. And we have a rule, once Eidim say their testimony, they can never change their mind. So it's almost like the contract says that the Eidim are saying that this loan happened. Now they're coming months later and saying, oh, that we were scared out of our lives, and that's why we signed, and the loan never happened. We have a rule: Kivan Shehigid. Once the Eidim say testimony, Shuv Ein Chayzu Magid, they can't change their mind. The Chit, and that is derived from a pasuk, and the Eidim has one chance at bat. The Chitema, do was said and say Hanimil Balpeh. When is that statement true? Only in court. When Eidim are in court and they say testimony, they can't change their mind. Aval Bashtar. But if they write something in a document, we wouldn't say that. Maybe they could change their mind. That's not true. Amar Rish Lakish said, Eidim hachasumim al hashtar. This is very important. And Eidim that are signed on a shtar, nasa kamisha nechra edusam bebezdin. It's almost as if their edus are ratified in the court. And therefore, it's almost as if once you know that it's a ratified document, because other agents said that it's their signature, so it's a ratified document, so they can't change their mind. It's almost as if they said their testimony in court that this loan happened. So how could they say later on and say, oh, we were scared for our lives, and that's why we signed on the document, and the loan really never happened? We wouldn't trust them, because once you say something, you can never change your mind. So what is Rabbi Bar Chama talking about? And this is where we'll end. Aleki itma aresh itma. Rabbi Bar Chama is referring to the beginning of the Mishnah. Beginning of the Mishnah says that this was an unratified document. Who's ratifying the document? The Eidim come along and say this was our signature. So they're ratifying it by themselves. But they say that we were anusim. We were forced into this. So on this, the Mishnah says you're believed. But on this, Rabbi Bar Chama qualified it. We didn't teach you that they're believed, that we were forced because we were scared for our lives. That's why we signed on this document, and falsely, that because the loan never happened. Then we would trust you. But if they say we signed on the document because we were afraid that we were going to lose money, but we know we did something wrong, because we should not sign on something that's false. So then, we wouldn't believe them. And so therefore, what we're going to say is that this document is ratified, the loan happened, because they're saying it's my handwriting. When they say we were forced because of our money, that part of their statement, we're not going to believe them. Because why won't we believe them for the second half of their statement by saying that we signed falsely because we were afraid we were going to lose money? Because by saying that, you're making yourself a Rasha, and you're a relative to yourself. Relatives are not good witnesses. And a person, we have this rule, my tama, ein odom mesim atzma Rasha. We cannot allow a person to make himself into a Rasha. So we don't trust him when you say, I did something terrible wrong. So therefore, we divide in half what you said. You're saying it's a ratified document, it's kosher, and the loan happened. Are you saying that we were forced into it because we were afraid to lose money? Therefore, we signed falsely. We were not going to believe you to that. Only time that we will believe you is if you say that the reason why you signed because you were afraid that you were going to lose your life. If you're going to lose your life, then we can't blame you for signing falsely, and therefore we would trust you. And that's what the Mishnah is talking about. Okay.
Very interesting.